And hello, folks. Welcome back to the Not Mike and Mike Show. My name is Brian Nelson. I'm, of course, not Mike. And joined with me, as always, is my co-host, Mike McLeod. He is Mike. And what?
Sorry. I'm so fascinated that you have the same intro every time.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Our producer, Chelsea, has actually cut something up. It is all of our outtakes from the last, however many episodes. And you start each one the same way. Could you pull that up for us, Chelsea?
Joined with me, as always, is my co-host, Mike. My name is Brian Nelson. My name is Brian Nelson. I am, of course, not Mike. With me, as always, is my co-host, Mike McLeod. He is Mike. And today, well, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
And I got a different shirt, but yeah. I definitely do the two hands thing, too. I just realized that as another thing.
You refer to yourself, and then you do this. Yeah.
But hey, if something works, you gotta stick to it.
You got a gimmick, and we're rolling with it.
And you know what else worked? Last year was our Not Mock and Mock Draft, our first annual. We had a pretty good run there. We were pretty accurate for our mock draft.
For the first half of the draft, the first 16 picks, we had more correct picks than Todd McShay and Mel Kiper.
Yeah, and hopefully we can duplicate the success here in 2017. And so, Chelsea, our producer, we have our first 8 picks lined up. We'll bring that for you on the screen right to my left. And we have Myles Garrett from Cleveland, from Texas A&M, going to Cleveland. I think he's the consensus number 1 overall pick, the best player available. So it's probably best if Cleveland takes the pass rushing defensive end, number 1 overall.
Yeah, something we were talking about during our sort of outtakes. Leading up to this is that there's no real top 5 picks, but there's a whole bunch of top 10 picks. So everybody's kind of interchangeable 2 through 12, but Myles Garrett, there's been some questions about his work ethic recently, but I think for the most part, Myles Garrett is up here and the rest of the people are all competing at the same level down here.
And obviously they have a need at quarterback. It's very glaring that Cleveland needs a quarterback. And so Trubisky is a potential landing spot for Cleveland to get their quarterback from the North Carolina product. But I think number 1 overall is just too big of a risk. You don't pass on a sure thing pass rusher when all the quarterbacks are going to need development in this year's class. There's no standout quarterback that's an Andrew Luck going to start from day one and change your franchise. It's going to be long-term projects. And Trubisky doesn't have that much experience at the college level as well. He's only started last year. Those 13 starts that he had, his only 13 career starts in Division I football. So
I mean, it's still 13 starts in Division I football.
Yeah,
and Carson Wentz played in Division II, and he got drafted number 1. So
yeah, and he did number 2. He did a lot better than Jared Goff did when he
played more games.
For how 3-year starter at Cal, I believe.
Yeah,
and so you really
can't put too much stock into that.
Yeah, definitely. But I think Cleveland, with the Moneyball type of mindset that they have, when you have such a sure thing value pick at number 1, you don't want to miss on your number 1 overall pick. You have to hit. And so Myles Garrett
is the only no-brainer in this draft.
Yeah, so let's move on to an organization that seems to have no brains, the San Francisco 49ers.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Yeah, we're going to try to pop back up our picks here. Jamal Adams is the pick here. Obviously, the 49ers would love to trade down, find a partner that's willing to fall in love with the potential draft pick and mortgage their future in order for the Niners to benefit in the long run. But if the Niners stay intact at 2, I think shoring up that back end of the defense with a leader like Adams, he seems to be separating himself from the other safety product, Malik Hooker, because of his leadership ability.
Right.
And so at 2, you don't love to pick a safety at 2, but if you have to stay there if you're the Niners, you pick Jamal Adams.
Do you think they don't go Marshawn Lattimore just because it sounds too much like Marcus Lattimore?
Yeah.
And they just have Vietnam flashbacks?
Just ACL aches in their knees whenever you hear the
Does Jamal Adams have an ACL tear in his history?
I hope not.
Because if so, then the Niners will pick them, obviously.
Yeah.
No, that was all Trent Baalke. Brand new regime. You got a guy in John Lynch who needs to make a statement, and he was a safety, so that kind of makes it also like there's so many places that the 49ers need to improve. And I think it starts with playmakers, and you got to take the best guy available. And as much as you need a quarterback and you need a running back, you still have Brian Hoyer, who hasn't played terribly. You have Carlos Hyde, who, if healthy, can be a playmaker. And, I mean, you're not going to take a wide receiver at 2, and you're not going to take an offensive lineman at 2 because they're not really that good this year.
Yeah.
So, or at least there's, not a lot of depth at that position. So you got to go defense somewhere. I think defensive backfield would be the correct pick, like you said. So I want to go back to the rest of the picks for this first 8 here, and kind of we made the mistake last year of talking about every single
Yeah.
pick. I just kind of want to move through. Chicago needs a cornerback. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Leonard Fournette, I think that's the first real kind of question mark we have. Is Leonard Fournette going there?
They have running backs in Jacksonville. Technically, their bodies, they're signed for the running back
warm,
position.
yeah.
You signed Chris Ivory last year to a 5-year contract. You have T.J. Yeldon still on, I believe, the third year of his
But
rookie
Leonard
deal.
Fournette could be that guy.
Yeah, and really that could be the help that Blake Bortles needs. And then here, I think it's tried and true tradition. We project a trade up.
Yeah,
we did
why
last
not?
year. Didn't really work out. But this year, we're thinking Cleveland needs a quarterback so much, and Tennessee, we've seen their propensity to trade down, get more draft picks, and so we're projecting Tennessee to trade with Cleveland here.
And also, we know the Jets need a quarterback, so that's where we had originally predicted Trubisky to go. So if Cleveland wants Trubisky, which that was the question, do you take Garrett or do you take Trubisky? You can get both if you trade your number 12, your number 33, and maybe next year's second-round pick for number 5, and you go up, you get the guy you want at Trubisky at number 5. And, there was talks that they wanted 5, they were going to trade 5 and 18 for 1 and 33 or something like that. But I don't know. That seems like a lot. So, yeah, Trubisky at 5 to Cleveland, so they get both the guys they want on their list. Another one going to Cleveland to be in the graveyard of quarterbacks.
And then that leaves the Jets with O.J. Howard. They don't know what to do now that their quarterback is off the board. You could go Deshaun Watson, but that's really a risk. And for a team that had 0 tight end production, you lose Brandon Marshall in free agency.
You got to get somebody.
You got to have some sort of playmaker. And so O.J. Howard, by far the best tight end prospect in the draft this year. Probably the best receiving prospect overall, even with the receivers included. I think O.J. Howard, his ability to block and catch will be valuable for the Jets to finally get a productive tight end.
And it wouldn't be the most Jetsian thing ever to pick a tight end at 6.
Yeah. And everybody's going to be like, oh, what? That's too high. And it's yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
Jets.
the Jets. ETS, planes.
Gotta love
I'm
that
learning.
mod. TM, that's trademarked, not Mike and Mike. The 7th pick for the new Los Angeles Chargers, that's not the Los Angeles Clippers, Malik Hooker. We had a good back and forth of whether I think they're in a prime spot here at 7 with a lot of activity going above them, maybe a lot of reaching going on. You're going to get good value at 7. And they had the choice between Malik Hooker and then the defensive end, Solomon Thomas. And so we think Hooker's just playmaking ability in the backfield is just a little bit more of a sure thing than Thomas, who is maybe more of an unsure thing.
Yeah, and you do have Joey Bosa on the other side, so you already have a little bit of a pass rush. You can kind of maybe not wait for a year or whatever, but you do have a semblance of a pass rush. That's like when people say that the Raiders need more pass rush. They have Khalil Mack. Come on. And
plus they have a really good secondary with Jason Verrett at cornerback.
Exactly. So you don't need a guy with leadership potential in Jamal Adams because you already have Jason Verrett, and like you were saying, the rest of that backfield is already kind of solidified. You just need a guy that's going to go out and make plays for your team.
Yeah. And so with the Chargers at 7, I think they're in a prime spot. Carolina, this is one of the kind of iffy picks that we kind of went out on a limb on, but Cam Newton needs playmakers.
Right.
And the wide receivers, there's just so many questions with them that to go straight wide receiver is kind of a risk. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is a risk as well here.
We talked about maybe John Ross going there, just 4.2 speed, take the top off of defense alongside maybe in the slot against Kelvin Benjamin. But there's just so many question marks about Combine Warriors, at least for me, that Christian McCaffrey, you saw what he did at Stanford. He's a guy that can be a slot guy. He can also be sort of a hybrid, bigger, what's the guy? I'm blanking on his name. This is so embarrassing. Philadelphia.
Sproles?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Darren Sproles. So he's kind of Darren Sproles-esque.
Yeah.
He can return punts for you. He broke what's his name, Barry Sanders' all-purpose yards record. So Christian McCaffrey is a guy that is literally like as close as you can get to a 5-tool player in a running back that you already don't really have much depth at. So maybe he's not a 3-down running back, but he's a guy that can make plays for you.
Well, we saw last year what happened when Jonathan Stewart got hurt. They didn't have anybody really to fill in that role. Like, you have Fozzie Whitaker. And so, like, you need that backup running back because Stewart has a history of injuries and, like you said, can be used as a weapon in the passing game as well. All right, so now we've gone through 1 through 8. Let's go through 9 through 16 with Cincinnati and the aforementioned Solomon Thomas. He doesn't go to San Diego, but Cincinnati gets another pass rusher for a defense that has pretty good pass rushing in its history with the likes of Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins. That defensive line always has been good for the Bengals, and you get just another pass rusher in there. Plus, it gives Thomas an ability to kind of be a rotational guy to start out with before getting into maybe a 3-down lineman.
Yeah, you talked about the Chargers being in prime position at 7. I think 7 through 11, all those questions, you have all those guys 2 through 12 on your draft board, and whoever is left at the need you need, or the need you have, I should say, that's the guy you take. And Solomon Thomas, he's probably the second best guy in this draft. And I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of people have Solomon Thomas going to the Niners. You hate that idea, but so we went with Jamal Adams. I wouldn't be surprised if Solomon Thomas goes 2 overall, but nobody else really needs a defensive end up to Cincinnati up to this point.
And then Buffalo, there's a trio of wide receivers that are in play to be the first wide receiver taken off the board. There's Corey Davis from, I believe, Central Michigan. He's from one of the Michigans.
There's so many Michigans.
He's coming off of a foot injury, and so that's kind of a question mark with him. There's John Ross, who is the workout warrior, like you said, just the blazing speed. And then there's Mike Williams from Clemson. And we know
I'm so
Buffalo.
tired of wide receivers named Mike Williams, though.
And then Buffalo, we've seen what they've done with Clemson wide receivers and wasting away their careers. So we're going to go with Corey Davis, as obviously they don't have a ton of weapons up in Buffalo.
They got Sammy.
You got Sammy Watkins, who seems to be hurt every year, and Shady McCoy. But you need another playmaker.
Hopefully the foot injury is just kind of a freak thing, and it's not indicative of worse injury history, because then you got Sammy. I was going to say Sammy Davis, Sammy Watkins and Corey Davis. That's what they'll call him if it ends up being like a cool duo.
The Rat Pack, and just call him Sammy Davis.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We did it. We did it, the internet.
Yes. Okay. And let's go
Buffalo. You got to do it now.
Just for the pure marketing. And
I'd leave it to Buffalo to listen to some guys that don't even get any views on YouTube for their draft advice.
Exactly. And they would be one of our like dozen listeners.
Yeah.
Like the Buffalo Bills. Of course they tune in.
I think we should add that just like
all right,
the Buffalo Bills are avid listeners. Thanks.
Instead of Ron Burgundy, like stay classy San Diego. Just
thanks, Buffalo.
You stay cold, Buffalo. All right.
Anyway.
Now, number 11, kind of a controversial pick. Obviously, this player probably would go higher. He's on a lot of people's top 10 list, but because of a diluted sample at the Combine, Reuben Foster, this could be a stretch. He could fall to another team, but New Orleans obviously needs a presence defensively. Sean Payton's put an emphasis on defense to try to help Drew Brees for once in his life have a strong defense. I think Reuben Foster in the middle could solidify that.
And I think with the leaving of Brandon Cooks, they might think about maybe Corey Davis here, but if Corey Davis is off the board to Buffalo, then they're kind of stuck with their second choice. And we also have talked about maybe Tennessee in that trade back getting Reuben Foster at 12. So if they want him, they got to take him here. You're not going to get to him at 32.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like mock draft dependent type of choosing, where
Exactly.
where you're playing out the scenarios and you're seeing where you can potentially get Foster. If New Orleans
Go ahead.
if New Orleans can hope and risk that Foster falls so far out that they can maybe pick him up with a second round pick, I think that's the best of both worlds. But you obviously can't risk that.
Ideally you want him at 24, but I'm sorry,
32. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Raiders already because later on we'll get to their pick. You'll see. But there's so many people that need an inside linebacker and so few good inside linebackers that I just don't see it playing out to where it like a Randy Gregory situation where he falls all the way to the end of the second round. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
The guy's just too good, and the rest of them just aren't.
Yeah. And so with Reuben Foster going to New Orleans at number 11, that brings us to number 12, Tennessee. Obviously traded back to get a couple extra picks from Cleveland here. And so you're left with Mike Williams and John Ross for a weapon for Marcus Mariota. I think that's what it really boils down to. Delanie Walker can only do so much for you. And I just think that John Ross's separation ability and the big play ability in a system where Marcus Mariota just throws slants.
Yeah.
You need more of a guy who
release,
can be a big playmaker rather than a guy who can separate and just catch and high point a ball in Mike Williams.
Right. And I mean, you have a possession guy in Delanie Walker that you can kind of check down to. It's a real dink and dunk offense, and you need to be able. I heard something somewhere that the ideal offense goes deep about 8 times a game, about 2 times a quarter. And so if John Ross only gets 2 looks a quarter and the rest of it's just slants and, spider 2Y banana to the fullback and Delanie Walker, that can move your offensive along. And then as people crowd the box, you have a one-on-one situation with a guy with 4.2 speed. And, what's the worst that can happen? You're not going to overthrow him.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think John Ross going to Tennessee is probably the better fit between the two wide receivers that are left. Arizona has an interesting pick here at 13. We're going with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I'm not too happy about this pick, but I'm also super happy about this pick because I hate Carson Palmer.
Oh, well, there you go. In the Carson Palmer era, this is definitely the wave of quarterback replacements, it feels like, where Carson Palmer probably doesn't have much left. Alex Smith probably not sure how much left he has in the tank. Drew Brees is getting older. Tom Brady's getting older. All these quarterbacks that were once great, and even like the Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger.
Ben Roethlisberger talked about retiring this summer.
Exactly, and so this is going to be an era of turnover for some pretty great quarterbacks. So turnover with a...
Well, yeah, that was that. But also I thought of a good joke for Eli Manning.
Oh, what was that?
He signed his retirement papers, but they were also fraudulent.
Oh. They weren't game used?
Yeah, they weren't game used retirement papers.
So, yeah, Deshaun Watson going to Arizona. It's definitely a change in philosophy as well. But I think Bruce Arians, the kind of offensive mind that he has would put him in a successful scheme. And he seems like a coach that doesn't scheme. It's not scheme dependent. Like, you don't need the quarterback to fit your scheme exactly. You can build around.
Play around it.
Yeah.
And I think that you have your workhorse in David Johnson, and maybe a guy like Deshaun Watson can run a read option and can completely change the offense.
Yeah.
And then you got a lot of fast, big receivers and the 11 through 15 numbers on your team.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
The two Browns.
The 2 Browns. The guy they cut that went to the Patriots.
Floyd.
Floyd,
Michael Floyd.
But I think that you just, like you were saying, it's a guy kind of like Kyle Shanahan, where whoever I got, I'll make it work. I know enough playbooks. I don't have just one playbook. I have the playbook, and I can do whatever I want. Just Carson Palmer hasn't run on the read option ever.
Yeah.
So.
And so we have Watson going to Arizona, number 14. Another kind of oversight on our part, Jonathan Allen.
Yeah.
Based off our research, where was he ranked? 4th overall?
Yeah, like Arn Anderson.
According to which?
CBS Sports.
Okay, so CBS Sports ranked him the number 4 overall prospect, but because of the movings going on beforehand, he kind of can't fall too far from this spot in the draft. So 14,
I think
Philadelphia.
I think we kind of ran into this last year where we're like, oh, by the way, like Myles Garrett didn't get drafted yet, and we're at 9. Like we did with Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
That's right. We were like, there's no way he goes 3 overall.
Yeah.
No way he goes past 10. I'm putting my foot down. He has to go 10. This is us putting our foot down, saying Jonathan Allen has to be gone by 14.
Yes. So Philadelphia, you get the Jonathan Allen sweepstakes. You get a really good defensive lineman to pair with Fletcher Cox inside with Philadelphia. That's a pretty good 1-2 punch up the middle.
Yeah.
Number 15, Indianapolis. This was kind of my pick, so
Yeah.
I'll take this.
Please.
Indianapolis seems to like just you need offensive linemen. Indianapolis seems like the most boring franchise. I know Ryan Grigson just got fired, so we'll see if this trend continues. Last year, you take a center, 1st overall. Here, I think the best offensive tackle on the board to protect Andrew Luck. Once again, same philosophy. Still probably not going to work. You're still probably going to be right 8-8 in that terrible division. So congratulations, you have a right tackle, and you're still terrible.
We were talking about the sort of quarterback turnover in the NFL. Well, who were the first 2 of the new breed? It was Andrew Luck and it was Russell Wilson. It was supposed to be RG3, but that never worked out. But it was Russell Wilson and it was Andrew Luck. And we are going to have this conversation later with the Seattle Seahawks. Their number 1 priority is keeping their quarterback upright and having quarterback longevity, because you're going to live and die by those 2 guys. So that's why they go offensive tackle, because honestly, their offensive line is trash, and it has been for a while. So, Trent Richardson was never good, but Frank Gore was a guy in San Francisco who had 1,000-yard years multiple times, and he comes here comes to Indianapolis, doesn't do anything. So you need an offensive line to protect your quarterback and establish a running game to take some pressure off of Andrew Luck. I think this makes too much sense there.
Yeah, and another thing that makes a lot of sense to us, Baltimore picking outside linebacker Hassan Reddick. I'm not too familiar with him, but you're saying like he's
a redshirt senior.
Yeah.
So he's 5 years out of high school. He's at least 23. He'll be 24 probably by the at least middle of the year. Yeah.
And so, like, Baltimore just takes those productive players in college that you don't know a lot about, but they always seem to be productive NFL players. And you have T-Sizzle's not so sizzling anymore. I'm not sure if he retired or not, but you really don't think of Baltimore's defense as Baltimore's defense anymore.
Exactly.
And so
ever since Ray Lewis left, there's not really been that playmaker.
Yeah, so I think this is the first step in Baltimore trying to gain back their defensive pedigree that they were once known for.
And there's been a real shift to sort of a 3-4 outside linebacker pass rusher kind of guy, and he kind of just fits a lot of molds. You can put him around a lot of places, I think.
Yeah, so that will do it for us here for the first half of our 2017 Not Mock and Mock Draft. When we come back, we will have picks 17 through 32 right after this.
Ever have an interest of being on camera as a sports broadcaster? Or have you ever wanted to learn how to operate a camera or what goes on behind the scenes?
If you want to be a star behind the camera,
or you could be the captain of everything behind the scenes, then we have just the program for you.
Well, did you know that Solano College is the only community college in the nation that has a sports broadcasting program and television network? which can give you a certificate to get an entry-level job in sports broadcasting.
Classes will be held right along the library in room 121.
For more information, contact Greg Poff. That's me at solano.edu. And remember, it's more than just sports. It's an education.
Hey, welcome back. So that was the first half of our draft, of the not mock and mock draft. I'm Todd Mockshay. Or is that you? I
I'm
can't
Todd
remember.
Mockshay.
You're Todd Mockshay. I'm
Yes.
Mike Mockloud or Mock Kuiper, whatever you want to call us. So we talked about the first half of the draft already. We're going to talk about 17 through 32, and this is where we kind of fell off last year. But we, I think, have put a little bit more effort into this year. Just kind of talking about team needs and why people would take things rather than just, yeah, sure, I guess.
That sounds good. That
Yeah.
sounds right. He would look good in that uniform. So, Chelsea, let's put up 17 through
24.
Yeah, 24. So, Washington picks Derek Barnett. I'm not sure who Derek Barnett is.
He's the third best defensive end in the draft. We talk about how great people are and why. Derek Barnett is the third best, with Solomon Thomas going 9. It just made more sense. There's a lot of people at the second half of this draft that need a defensive end. Washington was just the next up, and they also had some other needs that they can find in later rounds, second and third round. Derek Barnett just made a lot of sense as a defensive end.
Yeah, I think one thing I was talking about when we were discussing who they should pick up here, whether it's best player on the board, which was Barnett, I think that's the way to go. But one team need that I think needs addressing is how much they lost in free agency with wide receivers, with Deshaun Jackson, with Pierre Garçon. You get Terrell Pryor on a one-year deal from Cleveland.
I really like that pickup.
That definitely helps, and makes it not such a pressing need here that you don't want to be like I believe it was Cincinnati last year, where we need a first-round wide receiver. We need a first-round wide receiver, and then all the wide receivers get taken in front of them, and then you're left with like a corner.
Yeah.
And so Washington has that luxury now of you don't have to have a first-round wide receiver, and if Derek Barnett falls to you at this point, you take him, pair him with Ryan Kerrigan.
You can
That's
also
a good
take
pass
Mike
rush.
Williams at this point.
Yeah.
Like it sort of whatever. A flavor of the month.
I think just talking this out, I'm not sure. Did we have Mike Williams?
He's probably not even drafted.
Okay, that might be a slight oversight on our part, but let's look at Tennessee. I joked around that Tennessee should also take Mike Williams so they can have 2 wide receivers with their 2 number 1 picks, but again, value at this point. Garyon Conley is the the second best corner in this draft, and so Tennessee obviously building for the future with their trading back last year out of that, I believe, 2 spot, trading Philadelphia for Carson Wentz. And then here again with Cleveland trading back, Tennessee really trying to build that deep roster to support Marcus Mariota and that young squad.
Yeah, and then just kind of moving on down the list. Like, if you want to put Mike Williams for Washington, then just everywhere it says defensive end, just move everybody down.
Yeah.
So we put Taco here mostly because Derek Barnett's gone. But if Derek Barnett's still available, then he'd go there, and just so on and so forth down the list.
We want tacos. No.
14 sacks in a year, and you get free tacos, I guess. Basically, kind of the same situation. They kind of lost Vincent Jackson, not really, but mostly.
The old remains of Vincent Jackson are no longer under contract, so you don't really lose much. They could use somebody to pair it with Mike Evans, Mike Williams, Mike Evans.
The Mike and Mike show.
Yeah, exactly, and have a bunch of 6'4" wide receivers running around with Jameis Winston.
Sure.
That would be kind of cool.
I mean, all of these picks are basically interchangeable at this point, but we like the pressure that Taco Charlton. I think he's 6'6". I might be mistaken on that,
Yeah.
but he's big. And he can disrupt the line. If he doesn't get to the quarterback, he can put a paw up there. He'd be able to block a field goal or two, I think, at some point. So I think he just brings a lot of versatility to the defensive line. And you never really think about defensive line being a strength of Tampa Bay. So moving on, Denver, they just need some offensive line help, I think, especially when they got ransacked by the Raiders last year in their house. It really was a wake-up call that, like, hey, we can't stop anybody, and people can stop us pretty well. And so, you have you're Denver, and you play in the AFC West with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, and I'm forgetting the guy in Kansas City that they just...
Houston, Lamar Houston,
Justin Houston?
Justin Houston.
So you have a pass rusher extraordinaire in every other team that you're going to face twice a year. You need offensive line help, and Forrest Lamp is the best guy for that guard spot.
Yeah, I think this is where Denver hurts having such a successful year under Trevor Siemian, is that you don't have a high enough pick to pick the best tackle, Ramsich, or however you pronounce his last name. And this isn't a good year for offensive tackles as well. They really need a left tackle. There's really not that left tackle to really plug in day one and have your quarterback secure. So you obviously have to either go for another offensive lineman who's the best available, which is Forrest Lamp, or you go with a developmental tackle later on, like a third or fourth round pick, and then you sit him and then hope he develops into something later down the line.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like just team needs for Denver, you don't need anybody on the defense because you have a top 5 defense in the NFL. You don't need any wide receivers because you have 2 top 10 guys in my book. Running back, maybe they'd take Dalvin Cook here if they really wanted it, but who's he going to run behind? You just picked up Paxton Lynch and Trevor Siemian. So, yeah, it could still be an issue, but if you're really sold on those 2 guys, then, with Watson and Trubisky off the board, you're not going to go quarterback there.
Yeah.
So it's just offensive line or running back. I think offensive line is the pick to go.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised, too, if it could be switched with the Garrett Bowles pick at number 22 for Miami, where you want a tackle instead of a guard.
Yeah.
Let's go to 21.
And we actually talked about Garrett Bowles. Well, I guess we'll talk about more, but Garrett Bowles could grade out to be a guard anyway.
Yeah.
So.
So Kevin King is our number 21 pick for the Detroit Lions. Get some size. He's a 6'3" cornerback. A lot of defensives are valuing that size at the cornerback position because wide receivers are so tall nowadays. And you pair him with a Darius Slay, I think that's a good 1-2 punch for a defense that has been much maligned in the past. You have Ziggy Ansah, who used to be a pretty good pass rusher. Last year, I believe he dealt with some injuries, so he wasn't as effective. On the offensive side, do they need another skill position player at wide receiver? Probably not. Theo Riddick's been hurt at the running back position. You kind of plug and play any running back you want. You have Zach Zenner be productive for a Detroit team. So it's really skill position, not really that big a need right here for the Detroit Lions. Offensive line, you could potentially see something maybe, but I think Kevin King being that third quarterback off the board here for Detroit makes a lot of sense. Miami, Garrett Bowles, like you said, could shift inside to guard or stay outside to tackle. It's kind of like Laramie Tunsil, where he was a tackle in college, plays guard.
Who did Tunsil go to?
Miami.
There you go.
Yeah, so back-to-back offensive line picks, trying to protect Ryan Tannehill, that Miami offense. Let's skip down to 23, David Njoku?
Njoku?
Sure, the Joker. Going to the Giants. The Larry Donnell era is over.
Larry Donnell. He had one good game. He scored 3 touchdowns. It won me one game in fantasy football 2 years ago, and nobody's ever let me live it down since.
Nope. He's officially tied to Larry Donnell forever.
And both of our careers have taken very similar turns. We were both really good for one day and kind of dropped off.
It's all right. Maybe he'll be picked up as a free agent somewhere.
Maybe.
But probably not.
We're both big guys.
Yeah.
You know, he actually benched himself in fantasy football after he didn't catch a pass for 3 weeks.
See, at least Larry
he
knows
knew.
himself. He's
Yeah.
very self-aware. But if you look at the Giants now with Odell Beckham, Brandon Marshall,
Dude,
and
they're
if you have
so scary.
if you have a tight end to add into that,
All right, way too early prediction. Giants are going to the Super Bowl this year.
ooh,
Eli Manning, maybe not the Super Bowl, but Eli Manning's winning MVP.
oh wow, hot takes everywhere, folks. I don't know how to handle it.
If they don't get to the Super Bowl, then, I mean, because they have to run into other good people.
Yeah,
You got to still go through.
Dallas is pretty good still. You know.
Yeah.
The offensive line. But, Mike, let's get to your team here, the 24th pick, Oakland Raiders. Gerard Davis, what can you tell us about that linebacker?
Gerard Davis just screams Oakland linebacker. And he's a guy that you look at the needs of the Oakland Raiders, and it's basically like right tackle could use an upgrade, but it's not pressing. You lost a lot of people in free agency. You probably need a defensive tackle, but there's no really good defensive tackles here unless you're going to trade up. But I don't think Reggie McKenzie likes to do that.
No.
Then you need basically anybody on that linebacking core because you lost Perry Riley, you lost Malcolm Smith. You have beasts in Khalil Mack and Bruce Irvin, but you don't have anybody in that middle of the line. And then you need basically safeties. So with the safeties being taken top 10 and really no other pressing needs, maybe a backup quarterback if you're not sold on Connor Cook, but you don't take him in the first round.
Yeah.
So you look to inside linebacker. Gerard Davis started all of the games last year for Florida. Just a real punch you in the mouth. Can stop a running back on a 4th and 1, but he can also move laterally and break up pass plays on wheel routes and stuff like that. So he's a real versatile player from that middle of the line, and he may never be like the captain of the defense, but he's definitely never going to be a liability.
And that just adds to the young defense with last year's pick, Carl Joseph, at safety, another hard hitter to kind of set the tone for the Raiders. All right, so that brings us to the last quarter of the draft, picks 25 through 32. Patrick Mahomes, this is a guy, for me, selfishly, I would like to see fall into the second round, but I think there are just so many...
To the Niners?
To the Niners, you know, just, again, I was full disclaimer.
Selfishly, okay.
I probably would be the happiest with Patrick Mahomes as the
You also have that guy Sizer or
Kaiser, Deshaun Kaiser, but he's coming off a knee injury, so it's a little kind of shaky.
They'll probably go to the 49ers.
Yeah, who knows? But Mahomes, I think he could go with several spots here in this latter half of the round where Houston obviously needs a quarterback. They only have 2 on the roster. Kansas City, Alex Smith's getting older. They could use a replacement. Also, Pittsburgh, we talked about Ben Roethlisberger potentially retiring. And then New Orleans, Drew Brees, I believe he's 40.
And he wants to play until he's 45, too.
I don't
Maybe the birthmark has some, like, magic powers.
Rejuvenating powers, that's the fountain of youth.
Have you noticed his birthmark's getting smaller?
Oh, he's just using all of his youth left to keep going. Oh, you learn things every day, folks. But Patrick Mahomes from the spread offense from Texas Tech, I read that Bill O'Brien, obviously you don't know what to trust for the information out there, but Bill O'Brien supposedly really likes Patrick Mahomes as a product, a potential quarterback for the future. So Patrick Mahomes here.
Tom Savage isn't your Super Bowl winning quarterback?
Nah, I don't think so. So let's go to, speaking of Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, Russell Wilson needs some help on that offensive line. Last year, you pick a guard in Fetty. Here, you pick an offensive lineman who can be a guard or a tackle. Was a tackle, obviously, in Alabama, but probably projected to be more of a guard. But Cam Robinson, real physical presence, I think could definitely set the tone there for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Indianapolis's pick, he was the other guy, was Russell Wilson. You got to keep him upright. He's been the most sacked quarterback over the last 3 years. Andrew Luck being like number 2. And, Russell Wilson is now the face of your team with, whatever Marshawn Lynch is doing, whether he's coming back or whatever, he's not going to be a Seahawk anymore. And it is Russell Wilson's team, and you're going to live and die by him, and you got to keep him upright. And you just spent a whole bunch of money on, well, not a whole bunch of money, but you spent money on Eddie Lacy to kind of be a Marshawn light. So hopefully it'll take some pressure off of him, but you need somebody to run behind still. If Cam Robinson is any good at zone blocking, then it should be a pretty good fit.
Or not so light in Eddie Lacy's case, or Marshawn light because he's kind of got weight problems. All right, let's go to Kansas
They
City.
wanted him to lose
Actually,
like 60 or 70 pounds or something like that.
60?
Something like that. It was Pablo
Dang.
Sandoval bad.
Oh, didn't know that.
Red Sox fan, sorry. That hits home.
Yeah. Ugh, Pablo. All right, Kansas City, TJ Watt is the pick for us here on the Not Mock draft. The brother of obviously JJ Watt.
You don't think Houston takes them just for the familial connection?
I mean, they could, and it's also a need. Brian Cushing gets hurt a lot on the inside. Watt is your outside linebacker in a 4-3, but an inside linebacker at a 3-4. And Kansas City's biggest needs are the age of that linebacking core. You could see maybe a Takris McKinley, McKinney going. I was right the first time. McKinley going later on as a potential bridge to go from Tom Bahali and Houston to a younger pass rushing era for Kansas City. But TJ Watt, as somebody who can take over for Derek Johnson, I think equally as valuable for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Going down to Dallas, I think this is a real value pick for Dallas. Try to get some sort of pass rush that you're looking for that has been missing. You talked about Randy Gregory in the first segment. That really hasn't worked out. He's been suspended a ton.
They gave DeMarcus Ware a one-day contract to retire as a Cowboy?
Yeah, that's good for them. He's definitely the most prolific pass rusher I can think of for the Cowboys franchise. So obviously Ware's presence since he left has been sorely missed, and they haven't replaced him with anybody specifically. So Charles Harris, defensive end out of Missouri. Hopefully Dallas can get some sort of pass rush out of that pick.
They drafted Michael Sam out of Missouri a couple years ago. So
7th round,
Yeah.
He went up to Canada and quit. So
That's fair.
Yeah.
Anyway, 29th pick goes to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Ty Montgomery was their running back at the end of the year, and he was pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you need a legitimate...
between the tackles.
Yeah, you need a guy that can actually run the ball in Dalvin Cook. There's some other needs that they have, but the way our mock draft has worked out, it's kind of all been taken above them. If Green Bay was picking, 12, then they wouldn't pick Dalvin Cook. But this is the best pick. They might trade out of it, in my opinion. But if they're going to pick anybody, they're going to pick Dalvin Cook, just so that they can make Ty Montgomery more of maybe like a slot guy at this point against, God, I'm blanking on so many names. Jordy Nelson, Randall
Devontae
Cobb.
Adams, yeah.
So, you have a lot of weapons there.
Mm-hmm.
It just adds another dimension if you have Dalvin Cook take over the running responsibilities and you have Ty Montgomery just be sort of a gadget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so last thing Aaron Rodgers needs, another weapon. So Pittsburgh, this is another pick that seems like a good fit, but obviously with the recent news, Peppers as well as the pick for the Saints, Foster, they both had diluted samples from their urine tests.
I don't know what diluted sample means.
It just means that I believe it means that you drank. Obviously you drank too much water to cover up something. So it's like your test is inconclusive because it's so diluted that they can't read anything. So
Maybe they were just thirsty.
It counts as a failed test because it looks like a cover up.
Gotcha. So they weren't actually convicted of anything, but they get basically one less strike if they were to fail a drug test in the future.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Peppers, it's weird. You never heard of the diluted sample, and now this draft there's two of them. But obviously the physicality of Peppers being that kind of tweener, of being a linebacker in college and projected more to the safety role.
He's going to be a run stopper, really shades of Troy Polamalu.
Yeah.
The CBS Sports mock draft had Jabril Peppers going to Pittsburgh because the general manager for Pittsburgh would be reminded of Troy Polamalu and want that same sort of guy.
And so that's why we have Peppers at 30. 31, we have McKinley, the linebacker out of UCLA. You can see him going to a lot of places because he's that kind of 3-4 tweener where he's probably an outside pass rusher. Atlanta kind of has that Seattle system. I read that McKinley, when he was projected to the Seahawks, could fill that Bruce Irvin role. Obviously, Atlanta has Vic Beasley, but that pass rush could still be amplified if you have somebody opposite Vic Beasley. It's not even to the point where he has to be as good as Beasley. I kind of think of it as like a Whitney Merciless to your Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, where like he's serviceable, can get you maybe 10 sacks in a season.
He's the guy that will profit from all the attention being played to the other two.
And so if McKinley goes to Atlanta, I think that's a pretty good fit. And then our last one, maybe it's just because of the name.
I mentioned him in like 12 picks prior to this, and you're like, I don't know. So this is me putting my foot down. Chidobe Awuzie is going to be a first-round pick, and it fills a need for the New Orleans Saints at defensive back. You were talking at number 11, they wanted to upgrade their defense. I think you continue to want to upgrade your defense here, and you don't have any of your available wide receivers that were on your short list, unless they're going to – I mean, this is the pick they got for Brandon Cooks, so unless you're going to reach for a wide receiver here, that kind of makes it dumb, in my opinion.
You know who's available? Mike Williams. What do you know, folks? We forgot to put Mike Williams in the first round. So there you have it. That is our first round mock draft of 2017. It is in the books. It is obviously going to be wrong because we have probably one of the 3 best receivers not in the first round.
That's fair.
But, time is up. Didn't get to the results again of our Not Mike and Mike Reality League.
One of these days.
I feel it. We're going to get our time management down perfectly, and we're going to get to those results.
Yes, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Unprofessional. Excuse you.
All right, but we are so sorry for that, folks, but we hope you enjoyed this edition of the Not Mike and Mike Show. We will see you next time.